Welcome back to Face to Face. I'm John Ralston. The state Supreme Court has made a groundbreaking decision on how juveniles can be prosecuted. We're talking to the attorney who got the Supreme Court to rule her way and the deputy DA who thought that the law was fine. All right, let's talk about this, because let me show you what Mary Brown, who's the head of the Clark County District Attorney's Juvenile Division, told the RJ about this. We consider it an unfortunate ruling for victims and public safety. We're talking about violent felonies with firearms. We're not talking about misdemeanors or auto burglaries. But doesn't that fundamentally miss the point in the sense that this doesn't have anything to do essentially with the crime that's committed? It's what rights these juveniles have that should be the same rights that adults have, right? Isn't that the real issue there?
Well, no, it also has to do with the type of crime. That's what the legislature set out when they did the presumptive certification statute.
Certain crimes are automatically an adult.
Certain crimes, they said, should automatically be adult. When that legislation started, it was an automatic for any crime, robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, battery with a deadly, they had automatically putting them in adult court. They went and compromised and said, well, there's some juveniles that we think shouldn't go right in, and those are the ones with extenuating circumstances that we shouldn't put into the adult court. So they made a compromise to do that when they did the presumptive cert statute.
The extenuating circumstances, for people who don't know, some kind of mental incompetence, drug use, things like that,
right,
correct?
That would substantially influence their behavior, so it's not just criminal behavior, but there was something that affected them in committing those criminal acts. And that's what the legislature had started out, is to mandatorily put them all in, but then they saw compassion and said, certain kids, we don't want to do that to. Let's give them the shot in juvenile court.
But when you have a law like this, which I assume the district attorney's office supported at the time, the problem seems to me that this is during the whole truth in sentencing, tough on crime phase that really went through this state and other states. These cases are so different, each one of them, and I'll let Ms. Wildeveld talk about that, that to pass a law that just says just automatically certify kids, these are kids, as adults just because of the crime would seem not to take into account any of the nuances of each of these cases.
Well, and that's what they did with that statute. They were taking in nuances for these individuals.
With the extenuating circumstances,
yes.
You're saying?
Yes.
What about that? They did put the exceptions in for mental problems, for substance abuse, etc.
Right, but it is true. Unless you admitted to doing what the state has accused you of doing, those issues were never connected, and that's what the whole Supreme Court case was about. But John, going back to the violent felonies, what Ms. Brown said on there, we're not talking about violent felonies. Those kids will probably still be certified up. We're talking about kids who have a gun on them when a crime is committed. Nobody was hurt. Well, I mean hurt because they were a victim to a crime, but nobody was shot. A gun was never shot. Nobody died. Money wasn't taken. They were scared, which they have a right to be scared, and these kids should be punished for it because it is still a bad crime. But what we're talking about, if somebody gets hurt, those kids will probably go up to the adult system. We're saying put it back into the person that the voters elected to sit in this position, who would be Judge Voy currently, who is a juvenile judge. Put it back in his hands. He sees kids every single day. Put it back in his hands to decide who goes up to the adult system and who doesn't, based on his knowledge of what happens every day down in juvenile court.
And that is the problem with a lot of these so-called tough on crime laws, it seems to me, is you turn the judges into automatons then. They don't have the discretion to make these kinds of decisions. That's what we elect them to do. They shouldn't be bound by these very narrowly worded laws. What about that argument?
Well, even in the presumptive certification statute as it was written, there was still some discretion on the judge. He had to make the determination of whether or not there was a mental health issue, whether there was behavioral issues, whether there was substance abuse issues that substantially influenced. It still was within his discretion to make that determination.
But that determination couldn't be made if they didn't admit.
And that was our position, that they didn't have to, that once he found prosecutive merit, he could assume they committed the offense. And like I said, other jurisdictions do that, and this is the only state now that's found it unconstitutional.
Hang on just a second. Prosecutive merit, let's get past the jargon here. It seems to me there's a fundamental difference between the two of you and what the law actually says. Do they or do they not have to admit that they committed a crime to have this kick in, previous to this Supreme Court decision?
I believe not, based on the way that it's fashioned, that it's not a guilt or innocence phase. It's only where is it going to be held? Is it going to be held in juvenile court? Is it going to be held in adult court? There was no requirement that they admit guilt.
In both certification hearings, the transcripts clearly read, I cannot make the nexus because they deny they were there. So I can't even address their mental issues or their substance abuse issues.
When we come back, let's take a look at the language of the law, and because you're suggesting there's a little bit of a permissive nature to what you're suggesting there isn't. Let's take a look at the actual words the Supreme Court did. Back in a moment.
Watching Face to Face with John Ralston, a program presented in partnership with the Las Vegas Sun, Cox Communications, and KLAS TV.